Hello and welcome to Marxism Demystified, where today we're going to be looking at Vladimir Lenin's State and Revolution. All right, without further ado, let's get going. Uh, Basically, the way I'm going to structure this is I'm going to have a few quotes from the chapter, and then I'm going to have a brief paraphrasing or summary of the main points gone over in the chapter. All right, so we're going to start with Chapter 1, Class, Society, and the State. On page 8, he states that the state is a product and the manifestation of the irreconcilability of class contradiction. And on page 11, he further reiterates that a state is formed to restore special bodies of armed men which serve it, and the oppressed class strives to create a new organization of this kind, capable of serving not the exploiters, but the exploited. It is the state that is an organ of class rule and oppression of one class by another. The idea that these differences can be reconciled is a bourgeois notion to soften the reality of the situation. And any self-motivating armed organization of the proletariat will eventually lead to a class conflict, which means that for those vast majority of us that find ourselves within the proletarian class, that it is something that we should prepare for through our self-motivating armed organization. All right, chapter 2 is going to talk about the experiences of 1848 to 31, as well as the experiences of the Paris Commune. And in this quote on page 23, it states that the dictatorship of the proletariat is a state in the interest of the vast majority of the people against the insignificant minority consisting of the contemporary slave owners, i.e. the landlords and capitalists. As we touched on earlier, the state's function is to oppress period. So the goal of a proletarian state is to oppress the bourgeoisie until such a time as they cease to exist, at which point the methods of which the standing army and bureaucracy are maintained become common knowledge, and the maintenance of society can go on without the need for any oppression, as they have been vanquished by the vast majority of the proletariat. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Paris Commune in the next chapter, which talks about the experiences continued. And it states, I have a quote on page 34 that states, "Today, both in England and America, the preliminary condition for every true people's revolution is the smashing, the destruction of the ready-made state machine." We saw this in the Paris Commune, during which members of the commune were given a workman's wage and charged with both bureaucratic and standing army positions, in which the standing army was replaced by an armed populace. I think that the idea that everyone deserves a workman's wage and that the functioning of the state should be put into the hands of the people which comprise the state, the proletariat. I think that's very important, and that's a very big lesson of the Paris Commune that not only Lenin but Marx also goes over. And the state is like a diamond, only capable of being cut by something of the same makeup in their organization into a form mirroring the state which oppresses them. The layman and the proletarian alike will be educated on statecraft necessarily in combating the bourgeoisie. It is only by the victory of the parallel proletariat state that the state machine can wither away as its function becomes fulfilled by the proletariat themselves. The next chapter is going over some clarifications by Engels on the different points of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and these terms, other terms like the withering away of the state and all of that that have been brought up by Lenin throughout the writing of State and Rev. So in this quote on page 54, it states that the transition to a situation when it will be possible to supply apartments rent-free is connected with the complete withering away of the state. This little quote I chose because it demonstrates how without the bourgeoisie, profit incentive will be forfeit, so the resources of the nation can be allotted from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And we're going to go over A little bit on chapter 5 about the economic basis for the withering away of the state. Um, I found this quote on page 78 that sums it up quite nicely that says democratism is essentially democracy for the minority, only for the propertied classes, only for the rich. And then there's a second quote that I have that says modern wage slaves are so crushed by want and poverty that they want nothing to do with democracy. And it is only through the conquest of bourgeois democracy and the relocation of proletarian interests to the focus of public politics that the basis for a content community free of a state can exist, and it, the state, can wither away and do as monarchy and tribalism have done before and vanish from the public consciousness. We're going to talk a little bit about opportunism, and I found this pretty applicable quote on page 6 that talks about for the on page 6, on page 96, my bad. For the opportunists at the moment need nothing more than to leave safely to the future all the fundamental questions of the task of the proletarian revolution. And in this quote, I think it illustrates that inaction is tantamount to betrayal. Time will not turn the wheel of history, revolutions will.